What the does second yellow card know about setting up databases?
And while that's a totally acceptable way to set things up, I think there is a better way.
To be fair, he knows quite a bit, but FM can be played in a multitude of different ways. So let's take a look at setting up a new save and how league selection and detail level impacts your game. Now, the first step when starting a new save, whether quick start or advanced, is to choose the leagues you want to load. Maybe like second yellow card, you want a couple of leagues, but loads of players added through the custom setup. Or maybe you're a journeyman wanting as many leagues as possible so you can fill your passport. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle. But before we can make a decision, we need to talk about detail. And for this, I reached out to SI for some clarity. Detail level is basically a scaling option of realism versus processing time. We can choose how matches are simulated and where that balance lies. There are multiple versions of the match engine. There's the full detail engine, which is how we experience the matches we manage and gives us optimal realism with regards to outcomes and data. And then various simulated engines depending on different scenarios and league playability. These don't abandon realism. In fact, a lot of work goes into ensuring the game world, beyond your playable leagues, remains as realistic as possible. It merely nudges the balance towards processing speed, and that means things like being unable to watch back highlights of those games. We can change it via the Preferences menu. By default, the league you are managing in is on full detail. We can see here with USL Dunkirk in Ligue 2, all senior competitive matches is selected. The other leagues, when you start, are set to none. Now, this doesn't reveal the specific mechanics under the hood. I wouldn't expect that to be divulged, nor would I want it to be. I don't want to know how the sausage was made. What I do want to know, though, is how it impacts our save, and this is something I can find out, and we can assess for ourselves. A little disclaimer: football is unpredictable, and FM tries to model that unpredictability. Add in things like injuries, and there is always going to be an element of natural variance that has nothing to do with detail level. I've simulated the first season in the top 5 leagues multiple times, a third set to full detail, a third set to no detail, and a third where the leagues are not loaded at all but the players are. The performance data has been exported, where I've summed it all together, then standardized to per 90 metrics, and the results are interesting. In full detail, players do more of everything, but they do it worse. Take goalkeepers for example. They make more saves, they have a better save ratio, but they also concede more goals. And this trend continues for outfield players. They attempt more tackles but have a lower tackle win rate. They attempt more headers but have a lower header win rate. They make more blocks, clearances and interceptions, but fewer possessions won. More crosses but less accurate. More passes but less accurate. More fouls yet fewer cards. Otherwise, full detail is just more. More progressive passes, more key passes, more expected assists and actual assists, more dribbles, more shots, more goals. They sprint more, they cover more distance, they're offside more and make more mistakes. Overall, however, the difference in average rating is negligible. These trends are consistent. If I break it down by league, we can see the same difference between metrics at roughly the same margin across each and every one. This is fantastic. We have a tangible measurement of the difference between settings. I now know a player in a full detail league is more prolific, but less likely to win their headers than someone in a no detail league. Well, I've also broken this down by position group, using the assistant manager's opinion of this player's best position and then grouping accordingly. We can see some significant changes, like XA and assists. The difference between no detail and full detail for defenders is negligible. No detail midfielders perform better in this regard, whereas for strikers, it's the full detail players who have the edge. Again, that's great. There are clear, identifiable differences. But it's not practical. A defender wins 5% more of their headers, a striker scores 12% more of their goals. So many variables. I can't remember them all. It's why, for a data-led save, I advocate for setting all leagues you have loaded to full detail. This ensures the data is comparable between leagues. Well, you still need to factor in league strength, but that's an entirely different discussion. Up until now, I haven't shown the data from when the leagues weren't loaded at all. I'll refer to those as inactive leagues from here on. Every single metric was comparable to those on no detail, all close enough to be considered natural variance. So from a performance data perspective, inactive and no detail leagues are essentially the same. But there are some other considerations. The most obvious of which is transfer activity. Using the same simulations, I tallied up the number of transfers in England, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Manually, it was tedious. On average, between August and May, there were 217 transfers in the inactive leagues. That number triples to 651 on no detail. There's a slight increase further on full detail, which again is probably just natural variance. The most notable difference is in the winter transfer window. In loaded leagues, there were more transfers in winter than summer, albeit marginally. Whereas in the inactive leagues, transfer activity halved during the winter window. The implication is clear. When there are more active teams, there are more transfers. This should make it easier to sell, but harder to buy. The opposite is true when there are more inactive teams. Easier to buy, harder to sell. Whilst I'm here, I might as well see if detail level has any impact on attribute development. I exported the attributes of all players at the start of the save, then again at the end of each simulation. Now some players will move in and out of those top 5 leagues during transfer windows, so I've focused only on the players who are present in every single export. Then it's just a case of comparing starting attributes to the average ending attribute. Some attributes universally declined, the set piece attributes notably, but also finishing, tackling, bravery and reflexes. Everything else increased. There was, however, little discernible difference between no detail and full detail. That term again, natural variance. Now I expected this to be the case. You would hope it would make little difference. What I didn't expect, however, was the inactive leagues. A massive difference. Where attributes declined, they declined by less. Where attributes grew, they grew by more. In every single area, overall attribute growth was double, 1.6% compared to 0.8% for no detail and full detail. It's surprising. If anything, I would have expected it the other way round. But what this could mean, possibly, is that if you want to develop your youngsters, send them on loan to an inactive league. Now perhaps the biggest question of all, what impact does detail level have on playing time? With those top 5 leagues, and just those top 5 leagues, it took on average 23 minutes and 2 seconds to simulate with no detail. On full detail, that jumped up to 57 minutes and 11 seconds. That's 150% longer. Actually, it's slower than that. Processing time isn't just matches, it's getting through the whole calendar. So I ran some tests with 1 league loaded, 2 leagues loaded, and so on, up to 5. Each league loaded added between 1 minute and 10 seconds to 1 minute and 15 seconds depending on the size of the league. From that we can deduce that general processing time is about 17 minutes, and every league match adds roughly 0.2 seconds to that. This means 5 leagues added in total roughly 6 minutes on no detail and roughly 40 minutes on full detail, or 1.4 seconds per match. So full detail means match calculations take 7 times longer. Now this is all relative. How long it will actually take will depend on your PC and what you have running in the background and so on. What's important, however, is understanding that full detail will be noticeably slower. So how do we put this all together when setting up a new save? Which brings me back to second yellow card setup. It's a fantastic setup, especially if you plan on staying at one club or within one nation. By loading in players rather than leagues, you create a rich scouting pool and lots of opportunities for finding new Gen Wonder kits. Personally, I would recommend loading a few less players but a few more leagues, just to bring out more transfer movement within the game world, playable rather than view only. I wouldn't, however, suggest increasing the detail level outside the league you are playing in. Performance data between no detail and inactive leagues was comparable, and as there is such a large pool of players in inactive leagues, you will be well served maintaining that comparability. But again, that's just my personal take. If you're interested in second yellow card setup, his video is linked in the description below. For a data-led or Moneyball save, I would recommend prioritizing leagues and not adding additional players. For example, if I planned on starting a save in Asia, I'd load the 10 leagues in that continent, the top 5 in Europe, the top couple in North and South America, and 1 in Africa to bring us to a total of 20 nations. On a large database size, that's a slightly smaller total player count than second yellow card, but much richer transfer activity. That's going to be resource intensive, and depending on your PC, that might just be a little too slow for your liking. So we can take a more targeted approach, like I do for the Moneyballers series. The next one will be in Spain. That's the first nation sorted. For the rest, I want to think about where I'm likely to buy players from and who I'm likely to sell players to. I tend to think of this in terms of geographical, competitive, and demographic. Geographical is straightforward, which countries are nearby. For Spain, that's Portugal and France. For competitive, I look at which leagues are of a similar standard, so we can add England, Italy, Germany, and Netherlands to our list. Finally, demographic. I like to look at which nationalities are already well represented in the league. The transfer market is a great source for this, and from here we can see significant numbers from Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. That brings us up to a nice round number, 10 nations, which gives us a focused and well-balanced game world. There is one element that isn't quite balanced. We've got 7 European leagues running from August to May, and 3 South American leagues running from January to December. From a data perspective, I'm going to need to export at different times for end-of-season data. So let's bulk out the summer leagues a little more by adding 2 more nations. I've opted for Chile and Mexico. Everything else from here is down to preference, your choice of transfer mode, your choice of advanced settings. But once the save is loaded, then you want to set detail for every nation to all competitive senior matches. That would be my ideal setup for a lightweight approach, somewhere between 8 to 12 nations, very specifically targeted. This will give you a rich game world, active competition in the transfer market, and a large pool of players with comparable performance data. What more could you ask for? See you next time. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please consider leaving a like, or maybe even subscribing to get notifications for the upcoming Moneyballers series mentioned earlier. If you fancy some bonus content, including director's cuts and access to spreadsheets and other resources, you can join these wonderful folks currently adorning your screen by becoming a member or Patreon. Links in the description below.